Excited, relaxed. All right. So I'm going to ask you to interact in a second when we start.
And guys, don't be shy. Lean in and have a good look. Try to get in front of the camera. Don't look down the camera, but feel free to.
Yeah, you can approach maybe you guys here one at a time, and also they can see how this reacts maybe. Or if not, you will be the manager. So. Esto le voy a poner un poco de aceite antes de cocinar, pero lo voy a hacer en el momento. ¿Cuándo es la manera correcta? When it's the right time to put the spice on meat? Antes.
Sí.
En un lado.
Depends on what spice though. I mean, salt and pepper maybe later, but
Both.
yeah.
Because at the beginning and
Yeah.
All right,
You
and
can marinate it with it.
and what else? Do we have a knife and forks? This is quite important. So maybe can somebody go and get a knife and a fork? All right, we can ask somebody there.
Should I just get one?
Maybe some forks, maybe like 10 forks.
I don't know we have that many.
All right, so. And then I need some water for me. Should we close the door?
They're bringing the forks out.
Yes.
They close it for the noise.
Yes. So we're going to speak this tone of voice. I'm trying to explain. You can interact and maybe ask me. But if you ask, maybe they don't listen if they ask. So that's sure.
They can hear them.
You can hear them, right? So you can ask in English, right? And I'm trying to explain and maybe even ask some advices, but very short answers yourself maybe is better.
It's okay, a bit of chit chat.
Do you have any questions that you want us to ask?
No, I think feel free to make any curious question. Try to make not very stupid question because it's live and you will feel like...
Yeah, that's why I'm asking if you had any questions that you wanted us to avoid or questions
No,
that you
no.
want us to ask or
Everything can be...
Keeping is how it's vegan.
vegan, plant-based, yeah.
And
Yes.
it's extra right, like meat only do.
You can ask, for example, is this for vegans? Because, for example, I wouldn't... is anybody here vegan? Yeah, so you can ask, I wouldn't need this because I don't really need a vegan option that looks like meat. And I can try to explain why it's important for the omnivores or the people that want to have an alternative to meat that is maybe safer for the environment, but also without cholesterol, antibiotics, and non-carcinogenic. Yeah?
So make sure you put the phones on silent anyway, so
Again, sorry?
phones on silent.
Móviles en silencio, please. Una espátula para mover la carne, si no con los dedos me voy a calentar. A ver si encontramos una. Una espátula para mover la piecita.
Voy a ir a buscar una en la cocina.
Vale, y después te incorporas aquí. Pero cuando entras, cierra la puerta, please. Gracias.
There's not one down below you.
No sé. ¿Cómo se enciende esto? ¿Me lo encendéis, por favor?
Sorry?
Can you switch this on?
We never work in here.
Yeah, so this is important. Can you ask a chef to switch this on?
That's the top one, right?
Yeah.
Or should we use this instead, or what?
¿Puedo
No,
utilizar?
it's easier to use this.
¿Vas a cocinar en esa nada?
Anything that works. Where?
Both work.
Yeah.
Porque es que ese ruido solo se puede apagar, o sea, se prende.
That's
si
the
hay
background
ruido,
of the front.
prende.
Back.
Sí, tengo que cocinarlo. ¿Cómo? No va bien.
Hay que prender la campana.
No, the bottom, the top one.
Pero recupera.
Y las tenedores y los cuchillos, a ver si...
Okay.
Sí, ¿sabéis prenderla? Ah, muy bien. Solo una, ¿no?
¿De qué va a hacer ruido esto?
Put the bottom
No,
one.
ok. No, vamos a apagarla. Vamos a apagarla. No, déjala.
No, we're just seeing if it's...
So if we switch this on, it might turn on, or what?
Se tiene que prender la campana para
Para poder prender los fuegos.
Están automáticas.
¿Cómo hacemos para no hacer ruido?
It's on now, but it's not, that's not on.
Están relacionadas y entonces si
Porque cuando hay fuego y humo, eso
inmediatamente se prende la campana.
Vale, entonces no lo enciendo.
No, it's on now, but then this one isn't on.
Alright
Oh,
then.
yeah. So I don't think that one has anything to do with it, because when that turns on, it has to do with the gas.
They need you to
But
help.
that has no gas. O sea, esa no tiene gas. Yo creo que sí se prende.
So when I
Bueno, ahí viene.
when I cook this, it will start making some noise. Cuando empiezo a cocinar va a empezar a hacer ruido.
¿Hay manera de prender eso sin prender la campana, que hace mucho ruido?
Ah, no.
No.
Es que, bueno, esto ya está encendido.
¿Hay algún truco para...?
Sí, está encendido ya.
Sí, ¿cómo hacemos para no encender esto? Intento hacer poco humo.
Ahora, sí, claro. Es que si no... Bueno, esto funciona ahora. La campana está apagada, ¿no?
Sí, déjala apagada, por favor, no toquéis nada porque si no es un desastre para ellos.
Sí.
Um,
Está bien, pero...
se va a encender.
Igual salta lo de la alarma del humo.
Ok, pues prefiero que salte la alarma del humo y no que no se encienda esto porque como nosotros vamos a hacer poco humo
Vale.
y si no esto se enciende y no se escucha.
Vale, no hay problema.
Si se puede, si no.
Sí, no hay problema.
Mil gracias también por los tenedores. ¿Y otros platos? I'm asking them they're not sure, they think now is switched on and is not getting on.
Yeah, it's a safety.
They say, I didn't understand because he said now that it might turn on the alarm, which I said I prefer the alarm. ¿No? Pues hacemos el pequeño, ¿va?
This one.
No, pero,
Vale, hacemos el pequeño.
It's on three.
¿Sabes qué? Hacemos el pequeño y deja las dos si quieres cápsulas y ya está.
yeah, because
No?
it's like a very thing.
Vale.
Oh, he's cooking it right now.
¿Cuánto tarda?
It's gonna kick some.
¿Cuánto?
On high, but I don't think it's working.
No, ¿cuánto tardas ahora para cambiarlo?
Okay. I'd turn it on like medium high.
¿Pero va a dar bastante para hacer la pieza pequeña? Por la grande, por la grande. Sí, pero esta ha impreso poco, quizás aguanta, ¿no? No, vale, cambia.
Fácil. Solamente lo vas a pasar por la plancha, ¿verdad? No, o sea, y ya.
¿Qué me aconsejas?
O sea,
¿Algo
yo
diferente?
creo que el pedazo de carne es muy finito.
Sí.
Lo puse un poco alto. Pero.
Sí, a ver, esto lo tengo que mojar en aceite. Entonces, aunque parezca un poco raro, lo voy a mojar en aceite porque lo he mojado en agua y se ha ido un poco la grasa que tenía dentro. So now John is putting in the other code which works easier without any problem. So it will take 2 minutes, I think.
Can you do the other one?
Sí. But we can, I can, if you prefer, I can talk and we switch this on live. Doesn't matter.
It's up to you guys.
We're live now, so we're kind of...
All right. So let's start with the demonstration. All right. John, ¿puedes hacerlo desde atrás?
¿Desde aquí abajo o
No,
no?
mejor desde atrás. Sí, desde el lateral si quieres. Ahí. Sí. So we are going to do one new thing, which is the new version of our beef stick, which is not only plant-based, but also we do it with a printer. So because you are in a chef school here, we're trying to do and cook it as well. All right. So here we have already printed a couple of pieces. One is smaller, the other one has already been cooked beforehand, and we will see that when we cut it, it has the texture, right? And we also can try it.
What is it made of?
This is made of proteins, which are plant-based. So in this specific case, it's a mixture of rice and pea proteins, extracts, and we mix it with algae fibers. We mix it with the colorant, which is natural because it's an extract from beetroot juice. And then we use also some fat. We encapsulated the fat with an emulsion of rapeseed oil. What we get here is we try to get at the same time the texture, the appearance, but also the nutritional properties, which means we are trying to get at the same time around 25% of protein, around 10, 15, 20% of fat, depending on what kind of cut we are trying to do. And the novelty here is that we are doing a whole muscle cut replacement. So we have a bigger piece here, and now we cook this one if you like. So let's cook it as if it were a normal beef stick, right? So I would put some oil, even though, as you know, I'm not a chef here, I'm a bioengineer. So we were doing artificial organs for biomedical purposes before, and we are trying to use the same technology that is based on technology. It's called bioprinting, that we normally use when we try to create artificial organs in the lab, all right? So we adapted this technology, and now we are cooking this, and then we print a new piece. So you can see also how we're going to cook it and print it. All right, so.
In the future, do you see this replacing actual meats?
Well, we see that there is a big demand, not only in North America, not only in Europe, but we are seeing in Asia that there is a need of alternative protein. And some people are vegetarian, some people are vegan, but the majority of the population would like to have some alternative to meat that is better for themselves in terms of healthier for themselves. It's better for the environment, so that there is not need for so many lands that we normally use in for pasture and the food for the cows, especially soy. And then also better for animal welfare, right? Because the intensive farming is going to a certain limit, and we are trying to create an alternative to that as well. So there is many people, and this part of the population, we call it flexitarian people. All right, so you can see here, maybe you want to approach and see. We are trying to cook, this is a small piece, all right? So we are trying to cook it as if it were a normal piece of meat. So because it's very thin, we are going to give we are turning it around.
Sounds good.
Yeah? What do you think? So we are trying to get also some fats, so that it has this similar to a Maillard fat. In fact, we are choosing the polysaccharides, which means we are choosing the carbohydrates so that it really can resemble better the way you would cook a normal piece of meat. All right, so what we have put here is just oil. If you don't mind, I will put some spice here. This is barbecue spice. Of course, we are trying to use all plant-based ingredients, right? So everything here is plant-based. We got also some barbecue sauce, but this is also, we made sure it's vegan ingredients only. Right. So we check the other side. This is a small piece, and then we are trying to cut it, and we see what we believe as the texture of a piece of whole muscle cuts. So the novelty is that in the field there is many processed meat replacements. You know, there is many big companies like Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers. There is many new burgers that are coming out, and new hot dogs and new meatballs. What is needed is an alternative to whole muscle cuts. So, for example, a beef stick or a pork replacement. So what then we try to do as well, we are trying to mimic not only meat, but we will also try to mimic seafood, right? So in the future, because there is some alternative seafood that is very difficult to imitate. We are trying to mimic, for example, salmon, but this is our future project. We didn't start on it yet. We have the advantage of being quite customizable, right? So we work with capsules, and we are able to use different mixtures, and these mixtures are composed always of plant-based ingredients, or algae-based ingredients, or fungi-based, or it can be bacteria, fermentation.
So for each one, you try to approach kind of the same taste as the meat, and then the same taste as the fish.
Yeah, this is correct. In this particular version, what we have done is we have been trying to replicate the appearance and the texture of a beef stick. Okay. And now we are working. Our team is working on the taste. We started with texture, and we started with appearance and not with taste, because we already discussed with the people in the environment, and the big companies, the providers, told us that the most difficult part was to try to create something that had the texture and appearance, and the taste was a little bit well, easier for them to provide us the ingredients, right? So in the next stage, before summer, we are creating the new version, which has also the flavor, right? So at the end, we want to have texture, appearance, nutritional properties, and taste in the same product. And we thought that these 4 parameters together are the ones that replicate meat in our sensorial experience. Then it's much more complex, each one of these parameters. So now, if you don't mind, I will switch these on. And I'm trying to switch this on from here, if I can. Let me see. Yeah, I will, sorry, but I will turn here. And what you will see here is that this capsule will extrude through a micro extrusion technique these fibers. Okay? So the code that we use here is number 20, which is the number of the code that we have already cooked. So we see the same while being printed. All right, so we calibrate first. We check if the axes are correct, and we extrude this material through the nozzle. What we try to replicate here is a micro extrusion technology. So if you can pass me a paper, we make sure that this is on the right positioning. We will calibrate the machine. It takes 30 seconds around normally, so we make sure that this is going forward at the right speed and flow options of the machine, and then we print the capsules. So let me calibrate this. I put this in auto home, which means it goes home. Now we check that the filament will come out, so we can check how they replicate the micro filament that are actually trying to replicate the muscular fibers in meat. All right, so now we will extrude the material. Yes?
It makes individual pieces like this?
You can make also 2 pieces at a time or many at a time. This is our first prototype, and this has small capsules, as you can see, while the new versions that we are creating have bigger capsules, which means that we are trying to replicate bigger pieces, right? So this is around 80 grams, for example, which will be a course that is quite more typical, right, when you're trying to replicate beef. So as you can see here, this is a filament, all right? And this filament is done in a way so that it has a diameter in around 400 micrometers, each one of that, which means it's less than 1 millimeter. And what it tries to replicate is these muscular fibers, right? So let me check now if the machine is calibrated, and then we start printing in a second. So we move the axis, make sure we don't touch the base. All right, so now we can start printing because the machine looks ready. So we go home again, and we select the code that goes from a model, a 3-dimensional model, which is an abstract thing. It goes into information that the machine will translate into the piece. All right, so now we can use what we call code number 20, which is this particular case. So let me see. Now we'll select the speed and flow, which are around the speed of movement can be selected here. So I'm going faster with the speed, and I'm going also faster with the pushing. So if we can check here if the machine prints correctly the first layer, and now we are going to print. So now, Joan, can you maybe join me and make sure this works? So at the same time, we cut this, and we try this at the same time while this is printing. So if you want to come here, we are going to cut this while Joan makes the first layers. This is coming layer by layer, which means we are trying to use 3D printing here with this model, but actually for scaling this up, we need to scale this producing many kilos at a time, which means we want to create 50 kilos per hour with a bigger machine, which is not looking like a 3D printer, but is looking instead like an extruder, right? So let's go forward on trying this while we print the new piece. Our CTO is making sure that this is going to be printed in around 15 minutes so that we can try this at the same time.
I know you already spoke about the nutritional properties. Do you guys also add any vitamins or anything additional that, you know, vegans or plant-based people would be lacking?
Yes.
Like vitamin B12, vitamin D, iron. Is there
Yes.
anything added to this?
This is correct. So as I said, this version is trying to replicate the appearance and the texture. So we didn't incorporate yet some factors that are very important in a balanced diet if you're trying to do, for example, a vegan option, which means trying to make sure, especially as you said, iron and B12. Normally these compounds are put already in some cereals for breakfast. So as you know, even animals now, because of intensive farming, in some cases they need to addition that to the animals. What is the novelty here is we can create something which is new. So do you want to try to cut and see that it doesn't look like, well, we believe it doesn't look like a ground meat, but it looks like a fibrous meat instead.
And what's the difference between this one and that one? Because they look different.
Yes, this is another model. As you see, we cut this before, and we have cooked this before. So we calibrated the machine because we came here and we created the piece. This has already been cooked, and this one is the new one that we have already done. So the texture is a bit different, as you might see. And now, if you want, I'm trying this first. Want to make sure. This version you can try. We put very, very little oil. This one is the one which is very with a quantity of oil inside which is very little, which means it's very dry. So in the next version that we are doing now, this one has fat encapsulated.
It actually tastes like meat.
Well, it tastes this one like a first trial.
Yeah, it has like, yeah.
We believe it's the first trial because we're starting now to talk with the providers that really give the ingredients to the plant-based sector when they're trying to do meat alternatives. So we believe that trying to incorporate these ingredients now will be not so difficult, we hope. Drink some water. So now I think that we will make sure this works, and we can do another piece. What is the difference here is that we can check the mixture, and we see that the mixture is very different from the actual steak.
The question here is, as soon as it stops printing, can we cook it?
Yes.
Yeah,
We will detach it first. So we will detach it first, and then we cook it. Right? So now we can, of course, add spices afterwards and make it always looking better. So as you know that you are in a cooking school here, it's much easier.
I have a question as well. You said with the texture, it's always kind of the same. So will it get to a certain point, like for example, meat and fish, when it can get to like, I don't know, rare or medium rare, or not just the same texture throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, we can have different extruders, so that we have one part which is more similar to the muscle part, and one part which is more similar to the fat part. For example, if you want to replicate in the future Kobe beef, right? So this special meat from Japan, as you know, these have the fat ordered in a different way inside the piece. So we can try to replicate, for example, some parts of the tissue that are more muscular, and alternate this with, for example, some parts that are completely focused on fat, which means trying to replicate this Kobe beef, for example, in the future. We can also add something new, for example, our omega-3s, right? Like if it was a super meat, something new, that not only you can try to select so that it doesn't have any cholesterol, it's also, compared to traditional farming, you want to make sure here, for sure, you don't have any antibiotics, for sure, even if you compare with red meat, for sure this is not carcinogenic in terms of colon cancer that has been studied in some kinds of red meat if you eat too much of that. And also you can incorporate new things like omega-3s, for example, fatty acids, which you can find in fishes and in some algae, but you cannot find normally in meat. So the future is looking like more customized, is personalized, and we believe that we will start with top chefs collaborating and having them as lead users so that they can help us develop new things. We have a range of texture in terms of tensile resistance, compression, and chewiness, so that we can now try to cut this, and you will see this one. If you have a knife here, yes, this one has been prepared before, and so in some cases you can also cook it and make it prepared beforehand. So this one was cooked beforehand and has more thickness. All right. So as you can see here, we have done this version with a bigger thickness, and if you cut here, you can see that it is very, very fibrous. All right.
It's juicy too.
So yeah, it's kind of juicy because in this particular version we have added some fat inside, and the fat is trying to is been added so that it can stay during the cooking process and it doesn't flow away, right? So the real novelty here, if you want to try, you can do it on top of the dish here. Try to cut it, and you see that even by hand, if you want, and then we can give you a piece of paper so that she can clean her hands. Right, so we can control the chewiness, and we are trying to control the texture in terms of tensile resistance, compression. Thank you. Do you want one as well? Compression resistance, so that it can replicate different parts of the muscle. So we, for example, studied in literature which are the muscles of cow that we can replicate, because we have a range of textures, and we made sure that, for example, rabbit meat, and we can try to be in the same range of lamb meat. Of course, we tried already only with this particular prototype, which was beef stick, because we thought that the beef stick was the holy grail when you try to transition from plant-based ground meat to actual whole muscle cuts. So a muscle left is as if it was were a normal muscle taken from a cow, right? We also have new projects in which we study, for example, cultured meat, and we have a collaboration now ongoing where we are starting to do meat in the lab instead. But this is not the case.
Will it be able to take cultured meat and do the same extrusion?
Yes, we can adapt so that we can have a technology that is completely plant-based, and it's already approved for the European market, while the cultured meat is a new project where we can work on that, but the regulatory agencies around the world don't allow this to go on the market yet, of course, because you need to check that it's safe for eating. So we are seeing that there is many companies in the space of plant-based meat and seafood, but because they are mostly on ground meat, when it comes to fibrous meat, it's very difficult. There is technology that is called high and low moisture extrusion, which works quite well with soy and with gluten, but when it comes to using the ingredients, you're quite limited, and you can replicate very well, for example, pieces of chicken strips. We have some companies already on the market working with this kind of extrusion, while when it comes to other ingredients like pea, rice, hemp, and we want to try new proteins, they don't work well with extrusion, because these machines go to up to 140 degrees, and what happens is that the material gets denaturated. So the natural aromas are lost, and what we can do now is trying to use new pastes like this one. We are trying to, maybe you can show you if you get nearer. This paste doesn't have the texture of meat, so you can try to touch it, and you will see it doesn't look like meat. The thing is, we use these micro extrusions so that we align the fibers internally to each one of the filaments. All right, so we don't use the printer because it's cool and we can create some strange, shapes. We use this machine, and we will scale with another machine that is bigger, because with this technology here at room temperature, we are able to substitute the traditional extrusion technique and try to do new things that are not on the market yet. All right, so this is the first time we are testing this new version, which is the plant-based stick 2.0. And what we are trying to demonstrate here is that we can get before summer to get the taste. All right, so
what's the shelf life, or how do you preserve it? Like if you wanted to send it to like
Yes.
a rural area somewhere where meat isn't available, would it be able to get to those places safely? Is that
Yes.
another option, future-wise for places that don't have availability with meat? Could that get there safely shelf life-wise, preservation-wise?
Yeah, so we have done some preliminary tests in terms of pasteurization, sterilization, high pressure, so new techniques as well, because it's very important to create some products that can be fresh and can be prepared in the restaurant directly, for the consumers, for the clients, and some others that can be packaged, right? So for the packaging, what we are doing is trying to get the right formulation first, and once we get the formulation, we want to do the test and see the shelf life. We have tested already once. Here in Spain, this formulation actually, and it tasted more than 28 days in fridge without problems, because we had tested many of them in a scientific manner with a professional research center. So once we get to the right version, we will, of course, do this again and try to sterilize or use different techniques and prepare some packaging. In the future, we would like to not only have this in Europe, we want to export, maybe not ourselves, but maybe give the manufacturers tools in terms of technology. So we want to provide them the technology, not in form of small printers, but in form of these big machines, so that they can create this and they can package and send. And in the future also, we would like to do some projects that are, for example, even humanitarian, where we, for example, provide some tests with alternative proteins that maybe are typical of an area which is in need of proteins. There is an area like Europe and the States where we eat too much protein. Actually, we eat around 4 times more meat than necessary, and we don't have this problem of essential amino acids. The problem is other countries, maybe especially in rural areas of the planet, according to the FAO, there is some areas, of course, where there is not this good access to all the amino acids. So we want to try to demonstrate that other countries can use their proteins from their lands and try to transform this into a variety of products, so that with a variety of ingredients you can get a variety of textures. All right, so this is the idea, and we're also trying to connect with some space agencies, because in the future they would like to do some cool work for future space travels or some tests preliminary in the International Space Station. So we are in talks so that we can start demonstrating that this can work in microgravity, and this can be sent in form of powder to space, so that is lighter, right? But then you can have tanks of water in space, and you can have ingredients in a powder form, and select those ingredients so that you can have at the end one product is customized for the space traveler. And here now we started the printing process. This is similar to the first that we have cooked here, and you can see that it is composed of microfilaments, and these microfilaments are aligned now on an orthogonal manner, which is a very simple manner that allows us to create these preliminary versions, right? In the next months, we are trying to use instead different patterns internally, so that the micro pattern can resemble much more a piece of meat. So it's already like with a texture that it can be in a range of certain whole muscle cuts, but when it comes to adapting, if you want, you can see from behind, from near, and you will see that if you approach, you will see that there is microfilaments, and what you can see is that we can manage the speed and the flow to make it faster or slower. In this specific case, we are doing a prototype of one that can be done with only one ingredient. But when it comes to having more complex shapes, we can use more capsules. So you can use, for example, 2 more capsules, 2 capsules instead of 1, and create, as I said, fat and meat and muscle in different parts.
You were trying to make bigger machines. Would the bigger machines be able to recreate the microfibers like this one?
Yes, the bigger machines are not working with one filament at a time, but we want to simultaneously extrude much more material, right? But this allows us to test new formulations every day. So we talk with top chefs, and we talk with food engineers in our team, but also outside of our team, and we can learn from you in chef schools, or we can learn also from restaurants and future owners of hotels. They want to be, for example, zero emission in their own creations in terms of restaurants, caterings, etc. they want to have alternatives, and they want to use machines that are, in this case, for example, it's much more efficient than a piece of meat. 1 kilo of beef stick is, in this specific case, 1 kilo of beef stick will take 25 kilos of feed for the cow, and 15,000 liters of water each single kilo, which means that it's necessary to find an alternative. And, for example, the land use associated with meat and animal protein sector takes around 83% of the total land worldwide, the total arable land worldwide, which means it's unsustainable for the governments as well, because they are trying to use their resources better. So as you can see here, what we are trying to do is creating these microfibers so that each one of them together are connected, and there is an interconnected porosity, so that we can do some create also experimental work where we can embed new material inside, because it's microporous, right? We have tested already. We are testing already the next products in terms of recreating pork, because of, as you see, the swine flu fever in China, and because the Ministry of Health said in 2016 they're trying to cut meat consumption there, and they would like to avoid to import that much meat from Brazil or from the US. And given the trade war as well, there is an instability, and alternative proteins can fill this problem as well, and try to give the other countries that now need to import meat from Europe, and from all America, well, a sustainable manner. And also because the middle class in China is growing, and the consumption of meat is always more demanded. There is an increase of 5% annually in terms of meat consumption worldwide, which means actually the consumption of meat is growing. And also we are going to be around 10 billion people on the planet by 2050, so we need solutions. We have worked here in Europe with the EAT Foods, so that we are, for example, trying to push this innovation forward, and trying at the level of startups to push this transition, because the big corporate in the space are a bit slower in terms of moving to the alternative protein sector, and startups are moving the needle, right? So we are trying to steer the system from the inside and provide the meat producers with a way to instead produce meat alternatives themselves, right? So we believe this one is a technique that is novel. There is other techniques that are being studied already. For example, we have in Europe, in Holland, we have great universities that are working with different technologies to align the proteins. And one of these technologies, these ones, we believe that the big corporates are interested, the big companies, the big producers are interested in, jumping into the meat, alternative meat sector. We are seeing that Burger King has launched in the US the Impossible Burgers. We have seen that McDonald's have done agreements with Beyond Meat in Canada.
Cost-wise, because you were mentioning the Beyond Burger and like all these plant-based burgers, usually they're very, very expensive, like, because since they're the alternative, like how would this...
So it's a very important question, because now there is a limited version, and the price is almost, it's here in Spain, for example, we can find it at double price of the normal beef burgers. What we have done here, this one is costing $1.5 per 50 grams, which is around $3 per 100 grams, which is around $30 per kilo. But we do that by selecting ingredients at very small scale, which means once we can get the right providers and buy in bulk, we can go down with the price. Take into account that this, you save time, because you move directly from the plant-based protein to the human consumption without the need of an animal in between. So of course, in terms of entropy, in terms of energy consumption, it's more efficient. The food system is updating, so that this transition can go to to producing in large scale these products at very low price. It's also true that the few companies that are already in the market are not many, so the competitors are not many yet. But now the big players are jumping on board. For example, Cargill yesterday said they are jumping on the plant-based meat sector even harder, and the big players in terms of agriculture, providers, machinery, and distributors and producers, all of them are moving because they don't want to see another milk transition. We have seen this last year that the big milk producers, some of them have gone bankrupt because they were not able to adapt to the change. And we see that the meat companies are updating faster because they believe that this is an opportunity. We also believe that Europe can be one center of innovation. We have great innovation here, and for example, here in Spain we are lucky that we have a great culinary tradition. I'm from Italy, but we are in Barcelona, where we are located now. We have access to great culture in terms of gastronomy, and why not try ourselves instead of just skipping the traditions and not moving forward in new things like alternative proteins. For example, if you talk about meat now, hot dogs or meatballs are not even normal meat, right? So we in supermarkets find processed meat, and we find different solutions which are not anyways looking like the meat that we see on some movies, like with the cows in in the fields free to move. In specific case of intensive farming, we need a transition because what happens now is that we need an alternative to animal practices in terms, for example, of always even innovating in health systems so that it's safer for us as well. For example, we have seen in China the swine flu fever, but we have seen that this coronavirus has started from wild markets. So meat is a sector that is moving forward, but still we see many problems associated with the meat sector, and there is need for alternatives, right? Here we want to collaborate with the food system and try to make this transition go further. So now, if you like, we finish to print this. We'll take around maybe 3 more minutes, and then we will move from the printer to the pen, and then we eat it directly. And as you see, this can be done in around 20 minutes completely. We will detach this from the plate now, and once it's finished, and we will eat this. This is fresh. It's been done right now, so we see that there is also possibilities for chefs to create new things, which means, for example, things that have the texture of meat, but maybe have the taste of plants or fungi, or on the other side, you can have the texture of meat on something that looks like a mushroom, for example, right? So we think that customization and personalization here is a strong added value. We think that food system is becoming always more sustainable, but also more customized. We are also trying to collaborate with research institutes in terms of health, for example. So we have talked with hospitals that work with young patients and with old patients. For the older patients, they would like control on the texture so that they can have controls on their swallowing problems, the dysphagia problems, right? And so they want to quantify and use customized technologies, not only to create meat, but for example also to try to control the texture on a very quantified way. And the young patients, they would like to have, for example, active principles in some medicines in the hospitals. Maybe very young patients, they don't want to get it, they would not like to get it in liquid form. They would prefer to have it in a form of something with a texture that is more appetizable, right? So that this young, for example, consumers also can get something that is plant-based and that has, for example, some customized ingredients inside or nutritional values, and then in the form, instead of a normal protein mixture, it can be in the form of something resembling meat or seafood. We are trying, for example, bacon as well. we are trying to have bacon where we have fat on one side and muscle on another side, but we are still at the beginning. And we are trying to do things that are not yet there on the market. We are not trying to do meatballs and burgers. We are trying to do a new thing because we start with a very different perspective. We start from bioengineering. And in our team, we always well, we started with the steak, but we want to move to the new technologies.
Everyone wants bacon.
No?
Everyone wants bacon.
Yeah, bacon is one very special food, and also we have well, in the form of non-processed food. There is many other parts like we've seen salmon, or we are seeing that the tuna is demanded always more, or you know, even can be food from traditional from one area and try to replicate it at the beginning, try to mimic it, and then create new things so that it doesn't need to be exactly the same. What we have seen is that we have already changed our food from meat. We have moved to hot dogs, burgers, and nuggets, right? So we think that this transition is going to happen very quickly, and we want to be part of this transition. So I always make a joke. I always say to my team that Kennedy said, we don't go to the moon because it's easy. We go to the moon because it's hard. So I always say to the team, we do the steak because it's not because it's easy, but because it's hard, because it's the holy grail, right? So we got lucky that the first test we got to something that had the texture, and then from there we moved to the appearance. So now it's missing one last step, which is creating well, the actual cut that you would see when you have a fillet, for example. So now we will see that the last part is going to be more fun because it's going to create some curves, and we can control this with some three-dimensional models, so that we can send, for example, in the future from our mobile phone, we can send and connect this as an IoT system, and in the future have not only well, we can have customized food at home in the next future. This is not our priority at the beginning. We are trying to create like a very, you know, the most advanced that we can. For example, like if it was a Tesla Roadster, right? We are trying to create the most complex that we can, and then trying to scale this so that it can be affordable to the whole society. So what do you think?
It's amazing.
Something new, or?
Very cool.
Yeah, at least at least we agree it's something new. So, right. So I think that we are trying to cook it with olive oil, like traditional here in Spain. Of course, you can cook it meat in different ways. So we are talking to meat experts, so restaurants that work with new exotic meat as well. We're trying to get some inputs from them. As you can see, the filaments create some perimeter around the areas that we want to print, and then we create this structure that is internal. We create this in a way that when you see in the microscope, you can have these microfilaments, and these microfilaments together, they distribute the force, so that when you try to cut it, the filaments help each other, right? Like if it was a net, like a fishing net. Right, so, and then we think that we are going to create always bigger pieces, so maybe already next year we have a printer that can create, as we hope, with different nozzles at the same time, very complex things. But also next year we want to build a pilot plant, which is like more industrial scale, and we can have it, well, we're trying to have 50 kilograms per hour, so that it's standard, that it's already filling the need of some producers. Where are you from? You feel that in your countries there is this is too hype, or do you feel that this is something that people will accept? Because this depends on the country as well.
I'm from the United States, and I assume that if you can make it taste good, there'll be a market.
All right. And somebody here is from Spain?
No.
Not in this group, all right.
No, no.
So, well, Italy and Spain have one advantage in terms of culinary. On the culinary side, Bloomberg Health Index in 2019 will put Spain first and Italy second on the healthiest country worldwide. because we have Mediterranean ingredients, we can use these ingredients and use them in our system in the form of capsules, or in the future in the form of bigger quantities, right?
You said you're Italian, right? So when you get an Italian grandmother to accept this, that's when you know you've made it.
Yeah, it's true. I think in some cases people already don't distinguish very well, but this depends on the people. If somebody is very used to meat, because this doesn't replicate the taste yet, if you don't put spice and you eat it raw, of course we still have some work to do on taste, but this is what has been called the most realistic for now, to date, the most realistic plant-based steak, right? So now, as you see, the last areas are being completed in the form of some curves, and now we detach it from the plate and we move it to the pan here. Do you feel this is already warm? Yes. So this time we can have with some barbecue sauce, so that it's of course getting into the mood of barbecue. Once we incorporate the good taste there, in terms of trying to replicate the beef stick even raw, which will be in around summer, then we can have this cooked in different forms. This is just one test we're doing today. We can have with any sauce and see what happens. Right, so what do you feel? What would you do if you were able to do anything in the world looking like meat or seafood? What would be your choice? Why go beef?
Yeah, probably. Or some very fatty tuna.
All right.
Or a salmon too.
So you feel that difficulties in having the fat incorporated in the right way?
Yes.
All right. So we are in this specific version. We are collaborating with a startup here in Barcelona today. This is done with some emulsion done by Cubic Foods, which is a collaborator, and we are trying to incorporate their fats as other fats as well. And this one is with the rapeseed oil. So we try to avoid, for example, using same mixtures that you can find in supermarkets. So normally you use coconut oil, canola oil, but we want to innovate and try different fats. So for example, this one is rapeseed, and of course it will incorporate some olive oil because it's porous. And maybe you think that there is some technology here that can help. Maybe, I don't know, vacuum technology can help.
Like vacuum seal it with oil so it absorbs it or something like that?
Yeah, I think we can collaborate with the chef and try to absorb the oil inside the structure. Now it's becoming more and more looking like a steak. So if you approach here, you can see, if you want to get near as well, you can see that this is doing the last layers. So now it's going to do the last 1 minute or so, and it will move away from the plate. So we will detach it and prepare the pan, so we cook it and we cut it again. Then we are trying to cook it again as if it was Novameat, but if you want to innovate, just tell me how you would do and we can try new things. So it's up to you. Now it's doing the last layer, so it's moving away from there, and we can cook it with olive oil if you like, or just tell me and we can test a new thing.
Can it be frozen as well?
We didn't test the freezing yet, but because it's proteins that already are not novel food, right? The good thing about this is that when you're not using novel foods, there is already many studies being done, so you can already know beforehand what are the ingredients that can be frozen properly or not. So now the machine has stopped, and we can detach it. Oh yes, but we can keep it. We can keep it for cooking. I have already some water with salty that can help. So I will detach this. Do you want to switch on the pan already?
It's on.
All right. So we'll detach this from here with some water, and we will put that onto the pan. All right. So let me get a spatula. All right. So this spatula is very big. Maybe a metallic spatula can be better. If not, I will detach it with this. It's no problem. All right, so I will get paper here and detach it. All right, so let me see. All right, we don't want to destroy it, so we are going slowly. All right, let me see if it's on the other side is well done. Well, in this case, we have done a simple structure. So you can see, if you get near, you can see that the plate was not done in a very complex way, but we can of course do the both ways with this kind of more resembling structure. So we'll use some tissues here, and we put on a pen if you like. So, is the pen ready? Yes. All right. So, we are using the spatula here. All right. So, as you can see already, before cooking, it has already the texture of a piece of meat. If I will pull strong, it will be already similar to raw meat. Although these are new materials, so we can control before cooking and after cooking if we prefer to have it stiffer or off, or instead more soft. Right. So let's see. Thank you. All right. And also the color. The color is a beetroot juice extract. So the color is embedded in the fat. Normally we mix it in a way that when you cook, it's going out a little bit, but it doesn't create this kind of oil going away like we have seen in different burgers. So it's becoming a little bit more similar in terms of color. I will add a little bit of oil here, and so we absorb a little bit more than before. So we check if it absorbs some of that. It's looking like it gets the oil inside. So we see on the other side as well. And now I think we can test it already. So first, what do you think? It's something new, or have you seen something like this before?
Never.
Yeah, so this is a small piece because we have used small capsules. But when it becomes bigger capsules in the next weeks, we're trying to do thicker pieces.
Pork chop or something?
Well, pork would be very interesting because we really see that Asia is in need of pork, and thicker also looks the next step, right? All right. So, what do you feel? Should we take this away already?
Yes, I think you should take it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
All right.
Medium rare.
So why don't we cook it? We eat this one already when it's still warm.
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.
All right. So feel free to cut and try. Very good. And please tell me what you feel if you cut. If you think it's something interesting or. So what do you feel?
It tastes better when it's warm. Yeah.
Better when it's warm, like normal meat?
The texture is there.
Like normal meat.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the same texture.
Amazing. I don't know if it's amazing, but something to start with. So now when it's warm and it gets some more oil, we feel that it's more authentic.
Yes,
I
it
don't know
is.
what you.
It is
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
juicier.
Would you think that maybe making it thicker would be interesting, or what?
Will be very interesting.
And integrating some pieces of fat, ribbons of fat.
Yeah.
integrating some fat, maybe like a separated part with only fat, like a bacon or like like a steak on the pictures, right? Yes. So this one we have incorporated the fat inside each one of the filament. We are trying to get it absorbed, right? But actually, we are trying now to separate the two parts so that we can have different areas with more or less fat. All right. So what we can do now is maybe if you want to fill with me a capsule, you see how to fill. So if we can get a capsule that is empty, if we have, so we can fill it. And if we have a spatula as well, who wants to fill this? Many of you can do it. How many we have? Do we have other capsules?
Yeah.
All right. So take this as you wish. This is the mixture that we are using now. And tell me, does it have the same texture of when it's cooked, or?
Not at all. It feels like.
This feels more like a pate.
Yeah, like a pate.
Right. No worries. You can fill it like.
I can use my hands.
Yes, with your hands, if they're clean, because we are going to eat this, right?
Yes, they're clean.
All right. So try to fill it as if it were working on with the materials for building, like cement and clay. Yes. So try to maybe get this and fill it without creating air bubbles.
Okay.
So that we don't have we don't break the filament. Although normally we feel that this material is good enough to work at room temperature, and also it doesn't create.
And do you have to fill these manually now?
You'd have a machine do this, right?
Yeah, now we fill this manually because we are moving to a bigger capsule, so we want to find a machine that does it automatically. But we may lose some jobs. Yeah, we can have people doing it manually. No, right. So this, for sure, it's something that can be done much faster with machines. But also,
you want to fill it all the way?
Yeah, please.
All
can you?
Okay.
Maybe you can try. So we don't want to break the knife, so don't make it too stiff, please, because it's thick. Right. So this material is composed of more than 20% of protein. It's composed of around this one 12.5% of fat. So as you can understand, this is much less than a burger, right? In a burger, you can find maybe 20% of fat. So you see that this is a little bit drier. And when you try to replicate, for example, chicken, you even use less fat. When you try to replicate steak, maybe we can move up to 15%. We are even starting to incorporate fibers that they are missing in the Western diet, for example, and trying to have these fibers substitute the fat or any sugar that we might want to add in the future. But actually this one is composed of pea protein, rice protein, algae fibers. There is a natural aroma. We selected beef brasato natural aroma that is fermented, and then we use the beetroot juice extract. So this is...
How do you actually go about creating the paste?
Yeah, so we mix the paste with patented technology. So we have patented 3 main parts, which is creating the formulation. Formulation doesn't need to be with specific ingredients. It's the property of the formulation that work with this microextrusion. Then the processing can work with a printer or can work with bigger machines, and the product. So we patented the 3 things, and we have IP, which means intellectual property, which we developed to make the paste being in this particular form, so that it can be extruded without any problem. So that before you can you push it a little bit harder so it becomes a little bit more dense. So we're trying to have this paste becoming like this, right, with texture. So what you see here, this is our version 2.0, which is very simple inside, but you see there is microfilaments here, right? So what we are trying to create is the same structure that you would see in muscular fibers. Normally muscles are composed of filaments which then are compose fascia, which means it's a hierarchical structure, and we use a technology that is called biomimetic because we assemble the fibers where each one of these filaments try to replicate the bundles of muscular fibers that we have in mammals, for example, in the case of cow, for example. But also, then we have a structure that is nanometric, which means inside each one of these filaments, that are micro, the alternative protein, in this case the plant-based protein that we used, are ordered in the same direction of the extrusion. So, for example, when you see here some shape, these fibers, inside of each one of them, the alternative proteins are ordered as if they were the intracellular proteins that you can find in muscular fibers. So actin and myosin, for example, in muscle, what we try to do is order them at the nano level inside each one of the filament, at the micro level, creating this structure. And in this case, for example, afterwards we create also what is the macro level, so the appearance, so the person can see that it resembles a little bit like a steak already. All right. So should we try to print a new piece maybe, or we can try to create a new structure? So I can tell you about the models that we have done. We have created one small stick at the beginning, then we move to this one which is thicker and can incorporate more fat inside. So you see that if you push harder, it becomes a little bit more chewy. So the next step is creating something like what you call here in Spain chuletón. I don't know, maybe a sirloin or bigger pieces, and try to replicate what is the fat part, which is much more complex. We are trying to use the number of ingredients as little as possible, because you see that the future we use the technology in the food industry, but we make, especially in here, we know very well in Europe, for example, that we do tests to make sure that all the ingredients we use are coming from selected sources. For example, in our startup, we are trying to make things at the beginning a little bit more premium selected materials, and in the future try to scale this.
Oh, no.
All right.
No,
Do you have
having complications?
Yes, I can show you.
Yes, please. We're trying to remove the air bubbles, but then.
Yes. So what you do here is you get the paste inside and you try to avoid the bubbles.
Right.
So what you do normally is you try to push this, but then there is a trick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I get the nozzle here, do we have a nozzle maybe? We can have this more dense. So let me see if I get a nozzle. We are using here a very small nozzle, which is less than half a millimeter in diameter, right? So we will put here, and we see now that we can create a filament. All right. So if we get also the white part that is useful for the plunger. All right. Thank you very much. So what we are doing now is maybe getting a plunger, and we can see that we make this more dense and prepare this for the printer. Right? So you see that this material is very special because it can come out from this, but it can come out also from a smaller nozzle. All right? So for the smaller nozzle that we will use now, we need to push a little bit harder because the machine can push harder than ourselves. So, right? So now we will add the nozzle so that we see that each one of the filaments that we create are microfilaments. All right, let me see. You see that my hand is shaking because it's a material that is very stiff, right? Although this material can be extruded at room temperature, and this material is softer before processing it. After processing, what we get is we change the properties. So now we prepare this so that we can start a round of printing as well. Do you have questions in terms of, is anybody of you flexitarian maybe? Do you know what is flexitarianism?
I'm vegetarian. something that looks like meat is a little contradictory in a way. But I think it's interesting to see that there's innovative technology. Definitely from when I started being vegetarian 4 years ago to now, there's a lot more innovations, which I think is pretty cool. But
Do you think that if more and more omnivorous try to eat...
I think that would be something more for people who have a hard time switching over to a plant-based diet. They, find it more difficult. So seeing options that look similar to meat makes the transition a lot easier. So I think that would probably be, more of a market.
In general, I think the future is moving towards more plant-based. So yeah.
Why do you think is moving to plant-based? Because people don't like meat, or because...
Just in terms of how you were saying before, in terms of sustainability, I think, there's a lot more conscious now about how the world moves forward, and there's been a lot of problems environmentally. So now, having this in the future, I do believe it can be a trend, like a big thing.
What I've seen on the news, which is very spectacular in a way, is that 95% of the Impossible Burger, for example, clients, they were not vegan nor vegetarian.
It's a curiosity. People want to know what it's like. They say, oh, it tastes like meat, it looks like meat. Why don't we just try it as an alternative? That's what I'm saying. It's very intriguing because it's so new. 4 years ago, none of this existed. So.
Yes, but this is a trend that you think is staying, or you feel this is a trend that is just disappearing?
No, it's going to stay.
We see the big ones moving in this direction, so we believe this is a choice they are doing. And we are seeing also farmers that are interested in see how they can update maybe new technologies, or even try new ingredients in their systems, in their lands. So we have seen this happening, for example, before with milk, and now there is an explosion of varieties, right? Soy milk, almond milk, there is oat milk. And we are seeing now that this might happen very soon, sooner than expected. Of course, our startup is working on this for the last couple of years, so we already, we believe very, very much that the compound annual growth rate of the sector is growing at around 28-30% in the next, before 2030, so in the next 10 years, right? 2030 has been set as a milestone for many governments in terms of choosing how we move forward and how we get there. But if we really are that many millions, billions of people more on the planet, we will need a transition. What we think is that it's more efficient, and normally in terms of calories, for example, you need more than 50 times more land if you are trying to get the same calories from cows, for example. For pork, for example, and chicken, it's a little bit less, but still in terms of efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions associated with the meat industry are around 14.5. You see, if you calculate with direct and indirect emissions, so if you calculate, for example, the transportation associated with that and so on, which is even more than all the means of transportations combined. So if you get the plane, the boats, and if you get the cars all together, it looks like the food system is impacting at the same level of transportation, and this was unexpected when the FAO and science papers demonstrated so. So we are seeing that the whole sector, in terms of trying to be more sustainable, even in trying to fly less and get more trains, this is moving very fast in Europe, and we need to be prepared. We are seeing, for example, in Spain, maybe have you tried the jamón serrano? So if you see, jamón serrano will be very difficult to make at this stage yet, still, but in the future, to do this curing technologies and try to do always new things is the next step, and trying to do what looks very difficult now might look not that impossible in the next couple of years. So now what we are seeing is that we do another version. Another of our version 2.0, and in this case we are going to cook it in a different way, so that we can see that this can be done in around 13-15 minutes if we do it with this small machine. If we do with the new machines, it can be much faster. So we range, in this case, if you do this in 15 minutes, the cost can be of this piece will be around $1, because it's around 30 grams maybe. Maybe less in this specific case, so of course it will be $0.50, because maybe this one it can be 15 grams. But when you put many extruders at the same time, you can have this duplicate. we think that we want to scale up this not with the printers themselves, but the bigger machines, because actually we think that if we help the manufacturer use the same infrastructure they're using right now, their transition will be faster. In our case, at Novameat, we use, well, we are trying to be quite fast and try to impact the system very fast. And we are trying to work on the long term, associating with the top players in each field. So, for example, we are a startup in this sector. It's not very difficult to find investments, for example, in this sector. So to create this, and if you are able to create something new, you can get the right investment, not only from Silicon Valley, but you can also find well, investors in Asia open to this, investors in the Middle East, because, for example, in the Middle East or Saudi Arabia or areas in that sense, what happens is that something like this would look like spectacular.
What about the machine? How did you go about creating like the whole thing?
So the machine is created on purpose. It means it's customized. What happens is that we create here the extruders, and this machine was adapted from a previous machine, which was a bioprinter actually, which means I was using myself this machine here in Barcelona to create bone tissue, to create muscle tissue, cartilage, and previously I've been working on skin regeneration. So the way to use these natural polymers has been translated to the machine. This machine is the smaller version we have, and now we are looking forward to have this on the market, which means provide this to the restaurants, hotels, catering, and this will be like an Nespresso model, right? You see with the capsules and the Nespresso, looking like a machine. But then in the next future, we want to have instead big machines that we provide to the big manufacturers. So a different scale, we want to create technology that can serve to different players.
When do you think we'll see it in restaurants?
Well, we have already in talks with restaurants, so we feel that you can have in a restaurant as a demo for people to try very, very soon, maybe the next month. Then before summer, I would like to have a partnership with one of the top restaurants here in the Mediterranean area, and have that in first in small, let's say, evenings, and try with small groups, and then scale this up with a new version of the machine. For chefs like you, I feel that this needs to be very robust and something that you can use without being afraid of damaging it, right? So maybe you would like to see less cables and maybe a machine that is easier to clean. So we are working towards this because we understand that the user is going to be not ourselves, but somebody that is working in a kitchen. So here, for example, today we are in a professional kitchen environment, and we do this on purpose so that we can demonstrate that these machines can be in the future bigger or smaller, and depending on the size can be much more efficient than this. Do you feel that size like this might fit if it's faster, for example?
I feel the size is good, and also maybe I was thinking like maybe we have preset options where you don't have to configure it or anything, you just press the button and it goes.
So you would like to have maybe a model for a bacon, one for a steak,
yeah,
and what else would you like to have in a restaurant in the next year? If we were to do this with you in as a...
Maybe some type of fish, a steak, and chicken.
All right. So chicken... Well, we provide the technology. So actually we focus on large scale, so working with the big players. But because we have this machine already being developed in the new form, which is more robust, and so we think that it can be useful for research mostly, right? So I told you that it can be researched, but it can be done for space agencies, but for hospitals as well, for example, top restaurants. Why not in the future for new projects as well, where you want to add an extra layer of customization. So some people would like to have maybe closed models, and some people would like to have a more open system that they can hack. Okay. Right? So in terms of vegetarianism, we in Spain here, we calculate, for example, and that we are in the range of maybe 1.7% of vegans, if I'm correct. Can be around 5-7% maybe vegetarians. But then there is a very big part, we cannot calculate that properly, but it can be around maybe more than 30%. It can be between 20 and 40%, which actually in their diet they're trying to decrease their meat consumption. So we are seeing on many documentaries online, for example, that many people do it for health-related reasons. Some athletes want to have an alternative that is maybe with more protein, no fat or less fat, and maybe something that avoids them eating all the time, for example, chicken, right? Some athletes have a very limited diet, and they want to recover their muscle damage after the efforts. And then we are seeing people doing this for a planet, which means that some of them choose to select in the supermarket something that is better for the planet, because they feel that this is a way which is easy, which you can avoid sacrificing. For example, the taste. You don't need to sacrifice the taste. You don't need to sacrifice the appearance and the texture. What we feel is that the alternatives are always good. So creating alternatives in this space will be much needed. So here we are printing this, and if you get in the microscope, you would see that these fibers you first dehydrate it, and then see that these fibers are composed of nano proteins and also the polysaccharides. So for example, the fat or the fibers mixed together, so that we create something that is in a balance. The proteins and the fat in nature are normally composed, are normally distributed in a very complex manner, so that we are creating here what is a simplification. We are starting also a culture meat project, and what we see and what we believe in is that in the future there will be new things like an hybrid, for example, between plant-based and cell-based, where in the future, for example, you can have fermented or even created by cells ingredients in reactors, and maybe add this to our microporous structure, or other startups can provide the fat in the form of, for example, adipose cells. So you can culture the adipose cells, and we are working now providing these scaffolds to the space as well. So we are trying to push forward the plant-based and the culture meat sector simultaneously. We believe that every nation should push in this direction. We believe that it's the right time, because we are in the right time of history, where we have the technology in place and we have the knowledge, right? We have the internet and we have the technology, and at the same time these two factors allow us to change our system very quickly. And we believe that we want to be remembered as the first generation that had the opportunity, but also the last generation that needed the change. So we want to be now helping the young people are striking around the world, very young, in high schools. We have the knowledge and we already have experience, and we can really impact the system. So we hope that this generation will be remembered as the ones that really recognized that we were in danger, and that, for example, biodiversity was in danger. Biodiversity means that right now, for efficiency reasons, even in agriculture, we are focusing on single crops, and we are not using variability of ingredients. And what happens is that we want to make sure that we don't want to have all single crops lands. We want to try to be sustainable, and we believe that we've seen some data, and it looks like if we were feed on a plant-based diet, it looks that we will be able to give food for 4 times more people than the ones that are now on the planet. So we really have a dependence on meat for different reasons. We have a dependence, and we believe it's because of our culture is very related to meat. You know, in some cultures, having access to meat before was a luxury, and if you have access to meat, you feel in some cultures you would feel that maybe this was something that you can achieve and the other part of the population could not. So it was we still associate this with something that is well, extraordinary, right? Even though some new studies have described that our teeth structure is not completely made for hunting animals all the time. So in general, even in the prehistorical ages, we were not eating that much meat. It's now where intensive farming has come to life, where everybody can have access to meat at a certain price. But we believe that the price of meat is increasing very much in the next few years because the meat consumption is increasing, but also because people are trying to get always the same products like beef, and beef cannot be scaled that fast. We've seen, for example, in Brazil this year that there have been fires, and these fires are related to the animal livestock system, because you need to have more space for the soy crops to grow. So some farmers around the world are trying to make more space and trying to make more space from the wild forest and translate this into crops, like especially soy, for example. So biodiversity is very important, and in our lab we would like to have in the future different crops. We would like to have rice, pea. We would like to have all the ingredients that we have tested in the future in the form of an exposition to demonstrate that we didn't stop to the first crop, but we tested to support biodiversity around the world. Of course, this is just one of the projects that are going forward. There are many companies in the sector working on tuna replacements, many companies working on processed meat replacements. But when it comes to fish, we are seeing that, for example, there is now a need for example, shrimps that are not filled with microplastic, for example, right? So we are overfishing, and in the future we want to focus as well on fish and seafood, because the oceans, the ocean, the greenhouse gas emission, the land use, and the warming of the planet are all correlated. So we need to find new solutions to avoid overfishing. We need to find new solutions to avoid intensive farming like it is, and we need new solutions to make it safe for humans, better for the planet, and for the animals. So what we started with is let's say the holy grail, but then new startups are coming, and new startups are creating amazing things. Some of them are focusing on culturing cells in the bioreactor. Some others are focusing on creating, for example, alternative to gelatin in lab, because gelatin is coming from animals, and it's used a lot in, for example, in cosmetics. So we are trying to use a variety of ingredients so that in the future we can test these new ingredients that are plant, algae, fungi, or bacteria-based or cell-based with our process. Do you want to cook this one now? Should we try with a little bit more salt maybe and more spice? What we can do is cook this one. We can cook one of the paste on a side. We can cook the paste, and we can cook this on the other side and see the difference, so that we can realize that actually the difference is inside the structure, and it's invisible. Right, so we can maybe switch on the pan, because this will take only 3 more minutes. And as a vegetarian, you feel that, for example, there are more and more people interested in the space, or there is people that switch directly to vegetarianism, or people that are mostly trying, for example, in fast food, these new things.
I think the trends definitely help create more awareness, and I think people, since it's more flexible, there's more options, so it's easier to make the transition. I've had, family members that have, not being completely vegetarian, but, more flexitarian, like you said, because there are more options. So I think this is a good
And you have seen,
but
You have seen that your family, you found more product in the supermarkets now in the last years?
Oh no, 100%. For me, my family was always worried that there was nothing for me to eat. But with the technology now, there's all these types of alternatives. I try and do more plant-based stuff that's natural, like plants and grains and legumes. That's more what I try to do. But with this new stuff, it's interesting going to the supermarket and be like, hey, look, there's a piece of steak that you can eat. It's interesting. So my parents have tried it. I've tried it. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of growth, I think, still to be made. But I think it's a good stepping stone forward for the future.
Well, I think we agree that if we were eating more legumes and more, beans and actual fruits and vegetables that are natural, would be better for everybody.
Yeah.
What we are seeing is that the transition.
The transition is easier for people who aren't like me, who are want to do it because I think it's better. I think for people like older generations, it's easier to make a transition if you're eating a piece of steak, even if it's plant-based.
And we are seeing that now, for example, focusing a lot on health. We are seeing that there is much more people that jump in, maybe because of something that refers to themselves, not to the planet. So maybe we're seeing people that do that because it's better for them. There is a documentary focusing only on the health factor of alternative proteins, and not at all on, for example, animal welfare or sustainability. So there is different groups of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. I think it's very interesting. And the growth is exponential over the past couple of years. So I feel like there's a lot. We're going to see a lot more stuff. And this is something that I've never seen, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so this is, if you are ready, we switch on the pen?
Yeah, it's on.
It's on? All right, so I think here we need just, we just need 1 more minute. I will detach this and make sure we don't, we make sure that we put this directly on the pan so we can test it fresh. All right, so the machine is finished now. We will detach this with help of some water. So we can detach this and put on a pan. So if the pan is ready, this will be, I can attach this, it will take just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, so let's cook this as if it were a normal piece of meat. Do you want to test new things? Maybe you want to try a little bit more oil and see if we can incorporate inside and absorb the oil. Because this one has already only 12.5% of fat, which is very low. And we want to have more fat because we are trying to do 15. So we can try this this time with a smaller version. So we detach this. We check the other side as well. In this case, we can see here a filament that is part of the structure, and you see that is elastic. So elasticity, when it comes to biomaterials, is very important because elasticity means that it's deformable and it can go back to the previous stage. So this filament, each one of them, all right, so we can see here a filament. Each one of these filaments together, this is half a millimeter, right? So if you get half a millimeter of vegetable proteins, normally you wouldn't get this texture. So if all right, I will break it, but the problem is, the good thing is that these are together assembled in a way that they help each other and distribute the force and the shear forces. All right, so let me check the pan and we move it directly there. It's hot?
Yes.
All right, so maybe you want to add some salt this time,
Yeah,
or?
and we'll add some pepper.
All right. So pay attention not to get the oil. Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you want to do yourself? This? Should we do together? All right, so. Cook it as if it were a normal piece of meat, so it's very thin, so it doesn't need much time. Maybe we put some barbecue spice as well, so it tastes like if it were in a barbecue. Do you want to create a bowl with that and try to put that on the pan so we see the difference, but not a very big one because it won't be needed. Just maybe take a little piece, yeah, with your hands make a bowl and or make it flat, yeah, like a patty. So very similar structure maybe, and then cook it, and we see that this technology works because also we use microstructure control. Yeah. Right. So add. You can leave it at the same time as you leave the other. So maybe we can leave it a bit more time because we started with the other earlier. Okay. So do you feel it's the spice is?
Yeah, like it penetrated.
Okay, I can see it. Sit on it.
Yeah, that's how it's fine, right?
So you see the color. It's becoming a bit different than before, right?
Yeah.
Maybe then, yeah, you can put some salt.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
So you see, it's not microporous, so you see that it acts a little bit different. Of course, there was water there, so of course it was making some more noise too. But we see how it reacts. Yeah, maybe turn it so we see how it goes. Yes. So the colorant that we use is beetroot juice extract, and well, it's a natural source. So, but now we will see the difference in terms of texture. So we feel the microfibers are different.
It's nice how it gets that Maillard, how it gets that like that nice brown.
So you feel that there is already a Maillard reaction going on,
Yeah.
and it's because of the polysaccharides, right? In touch with the.
Yeah.
So here the structure, we will eat this while it's still warm, all right? So when this is ready, we can cut this as well and see the difference. Right. I'm eating it this bite, which is a bit more thicker. Well, I like it. You did it better than me. Little bit of barbecue sauce. All right, do you want to try?
Yes.
I'll try this as well.
Oh, it's not soft.
Yeah. No. So give me your opinion. Eat both of them. What do you think? Which one is better?
I really like the texture.
So which one is better?
We didn't try that one yet.
All right.
I really like this one though.
So you feel once the taste is there, this would trick a chef?
Oh,
Yeah.
Definitely the
And I feel there's a lot of
other one.
gastronomically speaking, I think there's a lot of like fun things you could do with.
What will you do with?
I mean, personally, I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of like game you could do with this, like a lot of fun things.
Maybe make it very, very thick and try to get a lot of fat inside.
Something like that. Yeah, that's possible.
So maybe if you want to try this last piece, guys, with the get some vegetables as well.
No, that's no fun.
No fun. I like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, this one's better.
Yeah.
So it's because it's microstructured and these fibers are aligned in a very specific direction.
Right.
All right, so very good.
Yes.
Remember that this microfilament is what gives the properties. So
Right.
actually the microextrusion, it doesn't give something like this.